In this video, we are going to learn about the biological rhythms such as circadian, circannular, and circannual rhythms and biological clocks. Most living things are exposed to the rhythms of the solar system because of the earth revolves around the sun with regularly rotating at a constant rate on its tilted axis and has a predictable and recurring positions in relation to moon. Life on earth is subjected to cycle fluctuations in its environment. Thus, almost all animals and plants have to live in an environment whose properties are not constant over time but instead show considerable periodic fluctuations in various types. In this way, most organisms are exposed to drastic changes resulting from the rhythms of night and day or summer and winter. In addition, there are tidal and lunar fluctuations that exert greatest influence on organisms inhabiting the tidal zone. In the tune of environmental rhythms, animal behavior too exhibits a marked periodicity in its pattern of performance. This is due to the fact that the animals during the course of their evolution have acquired a variety of endogenous rhythms or biological clocks whose periods are matched with those of rhythmic events in the environment. Consequently, some rhythms of organisms are matched to the daily or 24-hour cycle, that is the circadian rhythm. Others to the 12 to 4 or 24 to 8 hour lunar hour day or tidal cycle, that is the circadian rhythm, and then the 29-day lunar cycle, that is the circannual rhythm. The yearly seasons, that is the circannual rhythm, on the time 14.7 days between successive spring low waters. Semi-lunar or circasigic rhythm. The remarkable thing about these rhythms is that this persists even when the environment scales or zeitgebers to which they are entrained are artificially excluded. They therefore seem to form a time base for behavior or biological clock within the animal. Such a biological clock is assumed as analogous to human-made physical clock, while appears to be integrated functional network of some structure located in higher centers of animals. So biological clocks imposes a kind of organizational structure on behavior. It helps animals to change their behavior priorities in relation to the time of day, month, or year. In most instances, behavioral rhythmicity can be explained in adaptive terms. Animals typically perform an activity at those times when it is best to do so. For example, most terrestrial reptiles inhabiting the temperature zones are active only in the summer months and even then around midday. This is because these animals are poikilothermal or cold-blooded and need high external temperature for optimum activity levels. Many bird species reproduce mostly in the spring and summer because at any other time of the year there would not be enough food to raise the young. Many invertebrate animals living in the tidal zones would confine their predatory activities either to high tide depending on whether they naturally hunt on land or on the water. Now let's learn about the types of biorhythms. First one is the circadian rhythm or biological clock. Regularly occurring daily cycle of night, light, day and darkness, night, have been known to exert a far-reaching influence on the behavior and metabolism of many organisms. The response of different organisms to environmental rhythms of light and darkness is termed as photoperiodism. Each daily cycle includes a period of illumination followed by a period of darkness and is called a photoperiod. The term photophase and scotophase are sometimes used to denote the period of light and the period of darkness respectively. Animals are not active continuously throughout each 24-hour period. Some, such as birds and butterflies, are most active during the daylight hours. These are called diurnal animals. Other animals, such as crickets, cockroaches, and many insects, owls, bats, including many other mammals, are active at night. They are called nocturnal animals. There are still certain species, such as rabbits, which reverse their active times for the which reserve their active time for their twilight hours of the day in early morning, dawn, or early evening, dusk. These animals are called crepuscular animals. Diurnal animals, nocturnal animals, and crepuscular animals, which live during the no, which reserve their active time in the dawn and dusk. Thus, a 24-hour cycle is marked by alternating periods of walking and feeding during daylight and sleeping or resting at night in diurnal animals. This alternation is reversed in nocturnal animals. Seasonal changes in the number of hours of daylight during the daily cycle regulate various activities of animals such as reproduction, hibernation, and migratory movement. Such regular day-night approximately 24-hour cycle daily periodicities or rhythms have been discovered for almost all animals belonging to various major taxonomic groups. Such regular, repeatable rhythms correlated with the Earth's 24-hour rotation are called the circadian. Circadian means circadian rhythms or circadian clocks. This term was first coined by the American ethologist Franz Hallberg in 1959 for repeating pattern of activity that runs about 24 hours in length. Circadian rhythms are popularly called as the biological clocks since their property is understood analogously to the physical oscillations of 24 hours. Now let's learn about the historical factors about circadian rhythm. Study of biological clocks or biorhythms is called chronobiology and it is of recent interest. Study of biological clocks is called as chronobiology. 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 However, the knowledge of biological rhythms or periodicity is ancient. As early as 4th century BC, the opening and the closing of leaves of the terminal tree according to day or night sequence was noted in the writings of Androstens. Periodic sleep movements of mimosa rhythms were investigated in 1829 and 1832 respectively by De Meyran and De Kenter. Charles Darwin and Pfeffer emphasized about innateness of biological rhythms in plants. The problem of rhythmicity of different physiological processes in different organisms was started to be investigated in detail nearly 75 years ago. The first report of biological clock in USA came from John Welsh at Harvard, working with crustaceans and working with insects. In Germany, Erwin demonstrated the in 1935 in a plant free running rhythm. The scientific community greeted their reports with distinct coolness and ignored them. Then in 1948, Dr. Frank had courage to announce organisms time themselves by environmental cues. These cues, he theorized, are not the distinct, such as light and temperature, but indirect environmental influences. Then introduced the Zeitgeber concept, which underlies that the environmental factors drive endogenous biological rhythms. His school then developed and acquired the knowledge of the functional properties of the biological clocks in humans and other animals under normal and experimental conditions. Mammalian biological clocks were, however, first investigated by Kurt Richter of United States. The School of Germany and Heidelberg by USA gave a significant boost to the chronobiological study. Examples of circadian rhythm. Descartes in 1960 provided an experimental proof of existence of a circadian rhythm in flying squirrel in the form of his wheel running activity. Flying squirrel had been entrained to a 24-hour light dark cycle and was then kept in continuous darkness. The figure shows the remarkable position in the onset and cessation of wheel running in the complete absence of the environmental cues to which it is related. It is also shows that, like the most circadian clocks, the squirrel's clock is not calibrated to exactly 24 hours. Wheel running started slightly earlier each day. Circadian rhythm of wheel running activity in the flying squirrel under conditions of constant darkness. Among invertebrates, circadian rhythm occur in behaviors ranging from vertical migrations by marine plankton and periodicity of pupal eclosion in dipterans to the sophisticated dance language of foraging bees. Algae and phytoplankton photosynthesize during the daylight hours in the upper regions of a lake or ocean. At midday, when the sunlight is almost intense, many mobile zooplankton are well below the surface. As darkness approaches, these creatures swim upward to feed upon the photoplankton and other. They sink back into the deep waters after sunrise. The distance that the species migrates is variable. Protozoans move only centimeters, whereas larger species travel many meters. Algae and phytoplankton photosynthesize during the daylight hours in the upper regions of a lake or ocean. Female crickets usually hide in burrow or under litter during the day and move about only after dusk when it is relatively safe to search for mates. In response, male crickets start calling to attract mates in the evening of each day. Cockroaches are almost entirely nocturnal in their habits, most of their locomotor and feeding activity occurring during the hours of darkness. If, however, they are placed in an experimental situation in which the obvious diurnal factors of light and temperature changes are removed, in continuous darkness and at constant temperature, the rhythmic activity is observed to persist but with a period which may depart significantly from that of the solar light. This natural or endogenous circadian clock, characteristic of an individual cockroach in specified conditions, may show surprisingly ac- accurate results in its onsets, and the different individuals may vary between 23 and 25 hours. The fruit fly Drosophila shows a circadian rhythm of pupal eclosion. Unlike the locomotor activity of a cockroach, which recurs nightly in some individuals, emergence of a fruit fly from its puparium occurs but once in its lifetime. It can be a periodic event, therefore, in a mixed age population of insects. Some rhythms of pupal eclosion or egg hatching, molting from one instar to another, pupation, mating, and oviposition are widespread in insects. In the Drosophila, the adults emerge in well defined pulses every 24 hours, either just before dawn if the light component of photoperiod is less than about 7 hours, or after dawn in the longer photoperiods. Human body too goes through regular biological cycles every day. Many of the circadian rhythms reach a peak at some regular point during the day or night. Our blood sugar level, pulse rate, and blood pressure also reach peaks around 5 to 6 pm. According to him, our sensory activity, keenness of sense perception such as hearing, vision, taste, and smell, also are at their best in the late afternoon. Such a sensory acuity reaches a second peak around 3 am. Morning 3 am reaches a second peak of activity, morning 3 am, not that time, and from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. is also an keenness of sense perception is higher. Now let's learn about some definitions of chronobiology. Biological rhythms. A biological rhythm in organism is the expression of their recurring life process. A biological rhythm in organisms is the expression of their recurring life process. A rhythm is wave-like or oscillatory in character. Maximum or minimum states of an event appear at identical or regular intervals of time. A biological rhythm in organisms is the expression of their recurring life process. A rhythm is wave-like or oscillatory in character. Maximum and minimum states of an event appear at identical or regular intervals of time. Exogenous and endogenous rhythms. Exogenous and endogenous rhythms. A rhythm which is dependent on environmental stimuli is called exogenous rhythm. In contrast, a rhythm that does not require environmental input to maintain its periodicity is called endogenous rhythm. It is self-sustaining oscillator, but it may be entrained by environmental information. Free running rhythms. An endogenous rhythm which is not entrained by any environmental information demonstrating its period spontaneously under constant conditions is known as free running rhythm. Period. The distance between two identical positions of a self-sustaining rhythm, two maxima and two minima, is the cycle of period of the rhythm. Mhm. A period thus includes two phases: a rise, that is a strengthening of a process, and a fall, the weakening of a process. It is designated by torque of the biological rhythm and torque for Saint. Now, what is a phase? It is the on the spot state of an oscillator. Any point within the cycle is called as a phase. That is what is termed as a phase. Zeitgeber. Zeitgeber. It is a German term. Zeit means time and Geber means giver. Zeitgeber is a periodic environmental factor that entrain the biological rhythm. For example, the light and dark cycle is a permanent Zeitgeber of circadian rhythms. Now, it is an amplitude. It is a range of fluctuation indicating the degree to which the process deviates from some mean value. Amplitude explains the level of biological rhythm in action. Any effect on biological rhythm is realized in its period, phase, or amplitude. Entertainment is also involved, and entrainment. It is the coupling of an endogenous rhythm to a zeitgeber in a way that both of them express the same period or the synchronization. For instance, if a circadian rhythm is entrained by a 24-hour cycle, it becomes a daily rhythm of 24 hours. Presence P and absence A of mother is taken by pups at night and day, respectively. Cycles P or A cycle entrains circadian rhythm of mouse pups. So, which are the diagnostic features of biological clocks or circadian rhythms? A circadian rhythm has the following properties. It must persist in laboratory under conditions of constant light or dark and at constant temperature. It must express itself in LL or DD as free running rhythm showing period close but not equal to 24 hours. Its free running period must be compensated for changes in the surrounding temperature, that is, temperature quotient for circadian rhythms should be close to 1. Temperature quotient is defined as the ratio between the period of circadian rhythms before and after the 10 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. A circadian rhythm is known to be entrained by the light period, dark period, and temperature cycles. A circadian rhythm must be able to shift and reset its phase in response to a change in light and dark conditions and temperature or chemical disturbance. The most significant features of circadian rhythm or biological clock are their persistence within free running period of approximately 24 hours and the demonstration of entrainment phases, shifting and resetting properties of them in LD cycles. Now let's learn about entrainment and related phenomena. Entrainment is a process by which an endogenous rhythm or biological clock is linked with an external geophysical rhythm. A rhythm or clock in LL or DD and the constant temperature free runs with a period approximately 24 hours. A clock, when presented with 24-hour LD, Zeitgeber, it sets and expresses a 24-hour rhythm. This is entrainment. Entrainment is a process by which an endogenous rhythm or biological clock is linked with an external geophysical rhythm. A rhythm or clock in LL or DD and in constant temperature free runs with a period approximating 24 hours. A clock, when presented with 24-hour LD Zeitgeber, it sets and expresses a 24-hour rhythm. This is entrainment. Entrainment is an important property of the biological clock as as it accounts for diurnal or nocturnal habit of the animals. While diurnal species rise with the sunrise, nocturnal species start their activity with sunset. Despite the coupling of endogenous clock to an exogenous agency, there still remains a difference between the periods of onsets of physical event and actual biological process. This differences that occurs in the beginning between the entrainer and the biological response is called as the phase angle difference, and it is denoted by the symbol psi. This property is called phase angle property of the biological rhythm. The phase angle difference is positive when animals start activity before the onset of the Zeitgeber. It is negative when onset of the Zeitgeber precedes the onset of the activity, shifting from one LD cycle to another shift of the phase of the circadian rhythm, and the clock is re-entrained to new Zeitgeber. It is termed as phase shifting property of the biological clock. The amount of phase shift is described as positive or negative according to the direction in which it has taken place. Now, structure of biological clock. Chronobiological investigations aim on asking the following sort of questions. Where does the circadian clock exist? Or what is structural complexity of the biological clock? Structure of biological clock in insects. In crickets, each day's bout of calling could get underway because the crickets possess an internal timer or clock that measures how long it has been since the last bout began. They could use this environment independent system to activate one onset of a new round of chirping. Alternatively, the insect's neural mechanism might be designed to detect declining light intensity or some environment cue and to activate signaling only when the critical cue, critical cue appears. Evidently, complete control system for cricket calling has both environmental independent and environmental dependent components. An environmental independent timer or clock set on a cycle that is not exactly 24-hour long, and an environment activity entrainment device for synchronizing the clock with local conditions. Experimental proofs for location of clock in insect's brain. If one cuts the nerve carrying sensory information from the eyes of a male cricket to the optic lobes of his brain, it deprives him of his vision and he enters a free running cycle. Visual signals are evidently Visual signals are eventually needed to entrain the daily rhythm, but a rhythm persists in the absence of this information. If, however, one separates both optic lobes from the rest of the brain, the calling cycle breaks down completely, and the cricket will not call in equal probability at any time of the day. From these results, it was concluded that in cricket, master clock mechanism resides within the optic lobes, sending messages to other regions of the nervous system. So, sunlight or other environmental cues leads to sensory receptors, then that needs to pacemaker or clock mechanism, entrainment pathway. Then this pacemaker has locomotor patterns, feeding behavior, hormone release pattern, other rhythms. These are the observed rhythms associated with this pacemaker. A master clock may act as a pacemaker to regulate the many other mechanisms that control the circadian rhythm of an individual. To investigate the nature of biological clocks in two species of silk moths, some scientists used surgical techniques. Adults of one of the silk moth species usually emerge from their pupal cocoons at dawn, and the other species enters the world as adults in the middle of the night. The removal of the brain from the silkmoth pupa of other species does not kill the creature or prevent metamorphosis, but it does destroy the emergence pattern. If the brain is transplanted from the head of the pupa to its abdomen, however, the animal is likely to emerge at the customary time for its species. This suggests that the cloak mechanism is contained within the silkmoth's brain. Earlier, it was situated in the optic lobes in case of crickets. So, the structure of biological clock in vertebrates. I have demonstrated that the biological clock is neural and in mammals, the probable site is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN, suprachiasmatic nucleus of the hypothalamus. SCN is a pair of cell clusters in the hypothalamus that receive inputs from the nerve fibers originating in the retina. In mammals, SCN lesions lead to complete destruction of circadian rhythm. Experiments with SCN of hamsters and Norway rats have suggested that SCN contains a master clock mechanism in these animals. Now let's learn something about pineal gland and biological clock. Chemical signals from SCN neurons activate a specific gene, CREM, in pineal cells, a gene whose proteins products ICER is presumably involved in some way in melatonin manufacture. As the ICER protein builds up in pineal cells, however, it begins to inhibit activities in the very gene needed to make more ICER. Indicates the presence of self-regulating negative feedback of genes in SCN cells. This means that the pineal gland has a way to alter its biochemical output in relation to the recent history of photoperiods that the animal has experienced. This actively enables the pineal to adapt to seasonal changes in day lengths, thereby helping the animal adjust its daily schedule to these changes. Thus, in some mammals, the SCN of hypothalamus contains the central pacemaker that sends signals to pineal gland. The pineal gland cyclically changes its production of melatonin with adjustments for shifts in photoperiod length, integrating the environment independent and environment dependent elements that regulate daily changes in behavior. The adaptive value of the environment independent components of such mixed systems may be that they enable individuals to adjust the timing of their behavior and physiological cycles without having to constantly check the environment. At the same time, the presence of an environment dependent element permits individuals to fine tune their cycles in keeping with the subtle delicate variations in their peculiar environment. As a result, a rat will become active at about the right time each night but will accommodate to change in day length as spring becomes summer or summer becomes fall. Light as synchronizer of biological clock and Ashoff rule. Light affects the biological clock through the photoreceptors or transducers or photopigments, etc. In different animals. Light is perceived through extraocular or extra retinal and ocular retinal photoreceptors. In mammals, it is mainly ocular, but in birds, it is extraocular and ocular. Naked mole rat like biological clocks. In contrast to rats and mice, naked mole rats live in colonies that occupy elaborate underground tunnels. They almost never come to the surface. When do, they open a burrow to the outside. It is usually just to throw out dirt from the fresh tunnel excavations. They have no special dependence on what is going on above them during the day or the night. And as one might predict, naked mole rat exhibit no circadian rhythm of any sort. Instead, individuals scatter generally believe episodes of wakefulness among larger periods of sleep, with the pattern changing irregularly from day to day. So, mole rats don't have exhibit a circadian rhythm. They don't have a circadian rhythm of any sort. Jurgen Aschoff formulated a rule for the effects of light on the biological clock. As it states, the period length of night active animals increase with increasing intensity of light in LL conditions, whereas that of the day active animal decreases with increase in light intensity in same LL condition. Thus, on increasing the intensity of light in constant illumination condition, the frequency of the free running rhythm increases in diurnal animals and decreases in nocturnals. This rule is also called circadian rule, and it still holds true for majority of the animals in which biological clocks has been studied. The effects of light on the biological clock is explained here. The period length of night active animals increase with increasing intensity of light in LL conditions, whereas that of the day active animal decreases with increase in light intensity in same LL condition. Thus, on increasing the intensity of light in constant illumination condition, the frequency of the free running rhythm increases in diurnal animals and decreases in nocturnals. So, functional importance of biological clocks. Biological clocks seem to occur universally in temperature and tropical organisms, including fungi, animal, plants, insects, and all vertebrates. This may have evolved in animals to time their behavior in relation to the external environment. They provide the following adaptive adaptations and advantages to the animal. Bed bugs are nocturnal predators. Their activity rhythm coincides with the diurnal habit of the humans. They are active from sunset to sunrise, a period that is set rest period of humans. Filarial worms infect the filarial worms infect the human lymphatic system. Their larvae parasitize the blood. The worms increase the number during night and vanish from blood during day. If the infected person changes its habit from diurnal to nocturnal, the worm will change its periodicity accordingly. That's very strange. That is something which is about the Wuchereria bancrofti, and eclosion activity in Drosophila takes place before dawn so as to coincide the emergence of the adult at the optimum humidity level in environment and at low temperature. This is vital because when this is changed or when this happens otherwise, fully developed individuals emerges. Their skin is not yet completely hardened or developed into a protective armor, which means that the insect would dry up very quickly. Development of the timing mechanism sets a predator to hunt when the prey is almost active. Development of the timing mechanism sets a predator to hunt when the prey is most active. Related species living on same diet feeds at different hours of day to avoid competition. Camouflage in ostriches is a function of the daily circadian clock, while black-plumed male guards the nest in night. Females with pale brown garb sits around the nest in day. Daily clocks measure the length of the day and thus determine the seasonal phenomena in animals, which use day length as environmental information. The synchronization of an enzymatic activity and the synergism of the hormonal effects on the body's environment is possible only by the principle of biological clocks. The synchronization of the enzymatic activity and the synergism of hormonal effects in the body's environment. Now let's learn about the tidal rhythms or circadian clocks. Circadian clocks. Lunar day is greater than solar day. Lunar day is greater than solar day. It is of 24.8 hours, and this is due to the revolution of the earth on its own axis but relative to the moon. The lunar day becomes 50 minutes longer as moon rises 50 minutes late every day. Tides are sea water movements which are caused by some astronomical factors. Due to gravitational pull of moon and sun, they represent the rhythmic rise and fall of water level, and often waves of long wavelengths characterize the process. In a lunar day, two tides occur at about 12.4 hours difference. These two tidal floods may or may not be the same height depending on the position of moon in relation to earth. These two tidal floods may or may not be the same height depending on the position of moon in relation to earth. If the moon is at equator, the tides will be at same height, but if it's north or south, the equator of the height of the two tides will be unequal. Types of tides. Tides are the following three types. Diurnal tides. First one is the diurnal tides. A diurnal tide is characterized by one high and one low tide per lunar day, such as tides occur in the Gulf of Mexico. So, the tides result when moon revolves the earth over the equator. Semi-diurnal tides. In this type of tides, in case of semi-diurnal tides, one tidal height is greater than of the other tide. Such tides occur in Atlantic Ocean, North Sea and Indian Ocean. These tides are caused when moon revolves the earth the north or south of the equator. Mixed tides. This type of tides is characterized by the occurrence of tides of unequal strength in indefinite spatial and temporal pattern. Mixed tides occur in Pacific Ocean, Australian coasts, Caribbean and Arabian seas. Spring and neap tides. A lunar month is of 29.5 days. As a result of alignment of Earth, Moon and Sun, two types of tides occur at two times in a lunar month. Spring tides are extreme tides and occur when the Earth, Moon and Sun become in a line. The gravitational pull of Sun and Moon work together. Thus, spring tides occur two times in a lunar month, one at the time of new moon and at another in the full moon time. Likewise, weak neap tides occur at night and quarters of the month when the positions of Earth, Sun and Moon is set at right angles. In this case, due to right angle arrangement, the gravitational pulls of the Sun and Moon work against each other. Now let's learn about tidal rhythms. These are common in marine animals and have periods extending between two tides and occur in animals exposed to tidal floods. Any organism living in the intertidal zone of the sea shore are alternatively submerged by water and exposed to air. This results in change of several types of environmental factors like the pressure, salinity, food supply, temperature, production of risks, etc. Predation risks. Pressure, salinity, food supply, temperature, and predation risks. A French scientist Charles Bond first described tidal periodicity in an intertidal flatworm. Further studies on the tidal rhythms were performed by M.K. Chandrasekharan and other scientists. Examples: clear-cut examples of tide entrained cycles which persist under laboratory conditions are the vertical migration cycles in swan-dwelling platyhelminthes, vertical migration cycles in sand-dwelling platyhelminthes, polychaetes and diatoms, expansion and contraction rhythms in sea anemones, filtration rates in bivalve mollusks, vertical migration cycles in sand-dwelling platyhelminthes, polychaetes and diatoms, expansion and contraction rhythms in sea anemones, filtration rates in bivalve mollusks, and swimming activity in fish. In an experiment of Palmer in 1973, shore crabs were raised in the laboratory from eggs to adulthood under a day-night regime without tidal influence. These crabs showed only a circadian rhythm of activity, but after some time, a tidal rhythm appeared after the crabs were given a cold shock treatment. It seemed that endogenous tidal clock has been dormant until started by the cold shock. Similar phenomena occur in the tidal rhythms of other crabs. Fiddler crabs show tidal rhythm of activity that may persist for up to 5 weeks under constant laboratory conditions. The crabs emerge from their burrows at low tide and actively forage, court, etc. as the tide floods, and they retreat back into their burrows. Now let's learn about the lunar rhythms or the circannular rhythms. Circannular circa-lunar rhythm or circa-lunar clocks. The lunar cycle of 29.5 days is known to influence a variety of aspects of animal behavior. In these cases, behavior is said to show circannular or circa synodic periodicity. Such circannular cycles are common among marine invertebrates and insects. In the annelid worm, palolo worm of the Pacific Ocean in the Polynesian Islands, reproductive activity occurs only during neap tides of the last quarter moon. In October and November, the pololo worms live in tunnels in the coral reef and their posterior parts containing the genital organs become detached from the anterior parts, swim to surface of the water where they swarm and release eggs and sperms. The swimming phenomena occurs 7 to 9 days after full moon. Fertilization occurs in the midst of this swarm of gametes and new individuals formed return to the coral reef below after a few days of development. The palolo worms provide abundant food for sharks and other fish, but by synchronizing their reproductive activity, the worms are able to overwhelm these predators and proportion of the gametes are always able to survive. Likewise, the Mediterranean polychaete Platynerus, an inhabitant of sea bottom, transforms into its sexual phase Heteroneurus and swims at the sea surface in synchrony with the full moon. The people in the Fiji island known when their annelid worms swam, they consider them delicacies and they catch them with nests to eat at feasts. Platynerus perform their swarming activity during the days around the new moon, and during swarming, worms release their gametes and then they die. Such a lunar periodicity of these worms can be maintained under constant laboratory conditions, although it appears to be labile to several Zeitgebers such as light. The California grunion is a small fish that seasonally spawns 3 or 4 days after a new or full moon, a time corresponding to the highest tides of the month. 1 to 3 hours after the tides begin to recede, the females, hotly pursued by the males, ride to the beach, bury their tails in the sand, and deposit their eggs a few centimeters below the surface. While the female is depositing their egg, one or more males encircle her and release sperm, which flow down the wet side of the female and fertilize the eggs. All fish return to the ocean of the next swim of a high wave. The buried eggs are then protected from the dangers of the sea until the next spring tide, a month later, brings high seas to carry the young out of sea. Lunar rhythms are also known in terrestrial animals. Lunar rhythms are also known as the terrestrial. Lunar rhythms are also known in terrestrial animals. For example, pit building activity in the insect antlion, whose larvae are called doodlebugs, reaches a peak at around full moon. Lunar rhythms are characteristic of many insect species. Doodlebugs reaches a peak at around full moon. Lunar rhythms are characteristic of many insect species from Placoptera and Diptera and Trichoptera, along with Lepidoptera and Epeneroptera. Jamaican fruit bats have a pattern of feeding that involves leaving the day roost in the evening and feeding throughout the dark nights during the period of the full moon. During full moon, however, they depart from their day roost at the Jamaican fruit bats have a pattern of feeding that involves leaving the day roost in the evening and feeding throughout the dark nights during the periods of the full moon. During the full moon, however, they depart from their daily roost at the normal time in the evening, but return when the moon is high, even when obscured by clouds, suggesting that they make use of an endogenous lunar clock to time their foraging and feeding behavior. Now comes the semi-lunar rhythms. Semi-lunar rhythms. Some seashore animals show semi-lunar or circa-psychic rhythms, which are synchronized with fortnightly circle of spring and neap tides. The periwinkle, for example, shows a marked 15-day periodicity in its locomotory activity. The species lives high up on the shore and is only covered by a high water of spring tides. Now comes the circannual rhythm. The term circannual rhythm is coined for rhythms that persist and recur annually with the free running period of approximately 365 days or 1 year. Annual periodicity in reproductive cycles have been observed in many insects, fishes, birds, and mammals. For example, in its natural habitat, the carpet beetle feeds on organic matter in old birds' nests and takes 1 or 2 or even 3 years to complete its development. Blake showed that the development of this insect or the carpet beetle comprised successive periods of diapause and growth, one diapause for each winter past. The normal period of this circannual rhythm could be entrained to an exact animal cycle by the naturally occurring changes in the day-night length. Among fishes, brook trout spawn in the tall brook trout spawn in the fall, bass and bluegills in the late spring and summer. Among birds, some of the best examples of circannual clocks were shown by the warblers and white-crowned sparrows. Among mammals, circannual rhythm control activity and hibernation cycles. Hedgehogs and rodents, ground squirrels and chipmunks. Biological rhythms. Testing the hypothesis that an animal has a circannual rhythm is technically difficult because individuals must be maintained under constant conditions for at least 2 years after their removal from the natural environment. One successful study of this sort involved the golden mantled ground squirrel. This squirrel is in nature, spends the late fall and winter hibernating in an underground chamber. 5 members of the species were born in captivity, then blinded and held thereafter in constant darkness and at a constant temperature while supplied with an abundance of food. Year after year, these ground squirrels entered hibernation at about the same time as their fellows living in the wild. Several behaviors of animals thus have been cyclic or rhythmic, such as eating and drinking, sleep and activity, or learning and memory. Circannual rhythms of golden mantled ground squirrel were studied. Animals held in constant darkness and at a constant temperature nevertheless entered hibernation at certain times year after year. Hibernation, activity, hibernation, activity, hibernation, activity, and hibernation. Reoccurring phenomena.